back in Canada now from the ETC. So I wanted to sit down and talk to you about the experience as a whole. More from the social aspect, the tactical stuff I might do as a different video, and we'll talk about that. But what I hope to include here is the Zagreb Experience, the singles event that ran for the 2 days prior to the 3-day team event, which we'll talk about too. But also the interactions with the other teams, the involvement that we had in and around the venue, and those sorts of things. So to do that, instead of looking at my face, we're going to roll a whole bunch of pictures that I took, and you can have a glance through those as I go. So this is my team. Team Canada represented well, so special thanks to Lawrence, to Ryan, to Mike, Michael, Kevin, Doug, Phil, Matt. You guys all made a great team, and I was happy to represent with you the country for the first time in a number of years here at this ETC. Fantastic spending time with you boys. Most of us had a group house together on one side of Zagreb, so we stayed there collectively, while a few others stayed with their spouses, etc., in a couple different spots. But we all came together at this wonderful arena here in the west side of Zagreb. This is where they do hockey and handball. And man, it was great to play in an arena-sized venue. Think about that, playing with toy soldiers in the same place that pro sports happens. This is the kind of thing that is kind of a long shot dream, but maybe is a potential long-term dream for us who play with little toy soldiers, that it can actually reach a point like that where it can be just as acceptable to have happen in those kinds of venues. Next up, I want to talk about the singles event that went on here at this venue. So this went on for the August 1st and 2nd, and it was meant to be a 2-day, 5-game event. It was open to really anybody, even if you weren't involved in a team that was representing there at the ESC or at the ETC, pardon me. You were certainly open to register for this one, and it actually registered 104 players, many of which were not actually on another team. It might have been because they didn't qualify for it, or they weren't part of the inner circle, or just independent guys, local Croatians, etc., or other players that didn't want to do the team event. We used it for the sake of getting a little bit of practice, because we knew, coming from North America, that our style of play was probably going to be different than what the ETC offered and the European players did. So we wanted to take this opportunity to expose ourselves to that and learn from it, which we certainly did. So 6 of us took part in this event, including myself. So from my perspective, I want to offer up a big thanks to the games that I had with a couple of great guys. A Serbian fellow who calls himself Schloss was a real gentleman, and it was a great experience to lead in with him. Took a lot of the edge off me, because I thought it would be a very cutthroat kind of atmosphere where everybody's trying to niggle for that extra inch and really scrutinize movements and play. But he made that real easy to me. It was back like anybody else at our domestic events. However, he was a crafty fellow. I'll give him that. And he certainly, I don't want to say pulled some things, but certainly did game interactions that was thinking a couple steps beyond me. So a great player, a good tactician, and he took me down in that game. Then I followed up by playing another fellow from Belarus who calls himself Galroch. And again, we had a great game together. He had a chaos army with lots of different elements. And that's the kind of army that I was expecting to see for the most part out of the Europeans, is many different elements instead of big blocky units, which is what we tend to play with. I actually ended up later the next day rather, playing a teammate of him, Alexei, who was also from Belarus. And similarly, he played an Orc and Goblin army that was very heavy in lots of different elements. Many chariots, small units of fast cav, small units of boar boys, etc., so those were all learning experiences for sure. Curiously enough, 2 of the other games that I played against out of those 5 were against Canadian teammates. The first one being against Doug, because after the first round, amazingly enough, out of the whole entire field of 100 plus, we were the only 2 guys that had 3 points out of the 20, so we had to play one another. So what we did, and what I did with Mike Bondi, who I played the next day, is we just laid it out and used it as a practice event. So I conceded wins to both of those guys, but we used it as a bit of an exercise to work on things that we had been exposed to in our other games and execute those a little bit better. So as you can imagine, I didn't do very well at this singles event, but that was okay. You know, me being the coach, my important role is to make sure that everybody else is as prepared as they can. So taking that opportunity to help out two guys was good. Now, despite that, we did end up with some good results out of both Matt Lau, who dropped a hard first game out of the 5, but ended up finishing 16th out of the field of 104, and Doug Lamb, not too far behind at 20th, also put in a good showing, making us feel as a team that we had learned some things from this, and this singles event was valuable to some of us to get prepped for the next 3 days coming. Now, so leaving that aside, let's go back to the positive. The positive was our next 3 days of experience for the real reason why we traveled across the globe to go to Croatia to take part in the ETC team event. So we knew ahead of time that we would be drawn against Spain. And we knew ahead of time that Spain was going to be a tough matchup. Like, they're one of the elites, and coming into this are certainly expecting to be at or near the podium. And we went through the first exchange process of doing the matchups with them. And it was a bit of a whirlwind. Like, those guys obviously were very experienced and prepared for it. And we were making it up a little bit as we went. So I don't think that we got the matchups that we wanted, but that maybe didn't matter anyway. We got blown out by these guys, and it was a super humbling experience. We scored out of a possible 160 points. We got 29 amongst the 8 of our players. So obviously a big eye-opener, a big awakener. But you know what? Those guys were good at having discussions with us and recognized our sort of rookie status. And they weren't condescending, but helped us to understand a little bit more about choices to make, etc., which obviously we hoped to apply for the rest of the weekend. So next matchup in the afternoon of that same day, we played against our rivals to the south, the United States of America. And despite our down feeling about the Spain showing, I was actually pretty excited about this, and I tried to instill the guys with a little bit of desire to punish the United States guys, because we wanted to be, in the end of the tournament, the best in North America. Well, things were looking good early, I gotta say, or at least a lot better. But regrettably, we had one table that was looking pretty poor, and then a few other things that turned against us late. So unfortunately, we only ended on 60 points out of the 160. And thus cemented our place in the basement for the next day. We went home and we talked about it as a group of how to improve a little bit and do things in a more concise manner. We talked about the lessons we learned, which again, I don't want to get too much into the tactics of it. We'll talk about that on a different video. But we did regroup in some ways. So the next day, day 2, we were paired up in the morning against Argentina, and these fellows were again good gentlemen. We learned partway into the match that they actually are all Spanish residents, so they play against the guys that we played against earlier. So they are pretty attuned to things as well. We had a bit of a better showing against them, so we're still showing improvement, and I was pretty pleased that we were getting there throughout this experience. So we felt good about that. We were improving each step of the way so far, and realistically, that's all we could expect. Now in the afternoon, we played against Slovenia, and these guys have a couple of real experienced boys on there that actually are part of rules team or development team with the ninth age. So there was a couple of hard matchups for sure, but once again, we did improve, and we got up to a higher scoring level in that one than we had in any of the previous 3. So again, things are looking positive. Things look good here. So we didn't want to peak too early. We were still looking to an upslope, but regrettably, we were still on the losing end of that exchange. and so still at the basement. Now, the happy ending to our game against Slovenia was actually before the game, when we did the matchup process, the guys presented some homebrew schnapps on the table, and we were invited to take a sip for courage at the beginning of that. So that was really fun to do with these guys. And that luckily carried over to the next morning. We were facing off against Serbia in this first matchup on the Sunday, which would have been our 5th match in total for the weekend. These guys again were pretty great. We had a good time bantering with them. Me and the coach Mladen spent a lot of time together while our guys were duking it out on the field. If you hearken back to my first matchup in the singles event, Schloss was my opponent there, and he is part of the Team Serbia. So again, even though we had some tough matchup with these guys, great exchanges. I think all my teammates had some really good matchups. I'm really happy with the time that they spent at the table, which was a relief. What wasn't a relief though is we got spanked again pretty bad, so we started to go back down. Remember, I said we wanted to show improvement each round, but I'm afraid we weren't quite good enough to pull it off in this one. So we had a little bit of a pep talk after that. We got ready for our final 6th matchup of the weekend, and we were paired against the hosts, the Croatians. So nothing edgy about it. Our games were pretty relaxed, but we did want to finish by reviewing a lot of the things that we had learned. So different tactical things. I used my timeouts with my teammates pretty judiciously here because I was learning to use that as well over the 6 rounds that we played, and I felt I got better at picking the right points to make that kind of thing happen. And it really did all pay off. We finished the weekend on a victory, a marginal victory, 84 points out of 160, so edging them out. But thank goodness, right? Like whether those guys in Croatia were taking it easy on us or not, really it doesn't matter. We feel like we did improve. We feel like we did apply tactics and thoughts that we otherwise weren't doing before we came there that weekend. And it certainly was great to finish on a victory, at least one, so that we didn't get skunked for the whole event. So all of us were really pleased with that and finished on that high. Even though in the end, out of the 38 nations that were present there for the ETC in Zagreb, the Canadians, unfortunately, were the last. But that's not all. It wasn't just about playing games there for those 3 days. I'm really proud to say the other thing that we came away real happy about is our Team Canada was nominated amongst only 3 other teams for the best painted group of armies. So we were alongside Italy, Montenegro, Belarus, and we were asked to display all 8 of our armies on a table so that all of the captains for all the rest of the teams could put a vote on who they thought was the best looking army for presentations. So it felt really good to be up there. That was an internal hobby win because we do take a good pride in our hobby here in Canada. So even though we weren't the winners of that, Montenegro was, and well deserved for that matter. They had some fantastically creative things, and you've probably seen some of their photos slip by as we've gone here. And I did a different video to display those in greater detail. But congratulations to those guys. We were happy to be amongst you. And I think the next time we come around, I threatened the Montenegro team, and I hope we can hold this up, that we're going to come back with stronger hobby presence and not choose the best tactical stuff always, but we're also going to make sure it's the best painted stuff too. So that was a great feeling. Thanks for that. So my conclusion is I'm still pretty high on the ETC. We performed poorly, but boy, did we have a good time. So thanks Croatia, thanks Zagreb, thanks ETC. We're going to do our efforts to come on back and improve on upon our standing on both fronts, the hobby and the game. And I hope to see many of you there for years to come.